Here we go. All right. Hopefully what you guys are seeing is a couple sitting on, it looks like a couch. Is everybody seeing that?
Yep,
Yes, I
I
am.
see them.
Is anybody not seeing it? Okay. All right, excellent. Everybody have a good week and weekend?
It was
Yeah.
great.
What's that?
Sorry, Lindsay. It was great. How was yours?
It was nice. I got a lot of stuff done. It's always nice to take it easy and relax a bit sometimes, but it's also nice when you can just plow through and get junk done. Anybody have a terrible weekend? I hope
No.
not, because that would suck. Well, there's two things I wanted to do today. One is I want to look through what people have submitted for their projects. One thing that I did notice is we have twice as many projects completed as were submitted to our discussion. And part of the project is when you get it done, you submit it to the discussion board so everybody else can see it. And so I'm going to be going through and grading those after we take a look at them today. And then we're going to spend the rest of the time looking at the Etruscans, Greeks, and Romans. I also published several more modules to show what else we're doing in the class for the next almost month. But there's also two more project deadlines set up as well. So, and if anybody has any questions or anything like that, just let me know. Have all of you been able to get this first project done?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Have any of you taken a class from me before? So you can.
No.
Oh, are you guys hearing that? The robot voice in my Apple Watch is freaking out. That's so funny. I love AI and I love technology when I have a 12-year-old nearby who can explain it to me. But beyond that, it's can be a little intimidating. So what kinds of actually would you guys mind if we get to your project, would you guys mind just spending about a minute talking about what you were doing?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Let me get there. We'll share this window instead. Okay. So I'm going to switch windows. All right. Can you guys see this now?
Yes.
Okay. The research project, stained glass windows. And this person, they did this on Gothic period, which is 12th to 14th centuries. That's 1100 to 1350 or so, which is exactly within the time frame of our class. It's right at the edge, but it's in the scope of the class. And this person, it looks like what they're doing is putting together basically a PDF where they're talking about several windows. And with a PDF like this, in the directions for the project, it talks about you need to have 8 photos. So let's see if they put 8 photos in. I see 5 so far. 6, 7, 8. Yes, so they got the right number of photos in there. And it looks like to me That, that's pretty interesting because for each of these, they have bullet points where they talk about what's going on, and the bullet points highlight the different elements of the windows that they want to talk about. And then at the end, they're talking about symbolism, craftsmanship, creativity, and critical thinking. I think for our first project, this is really nicely done. And for the works cited, it looks to me like, okay, we need, everything needs to be in alphabetical order, MLA style, with the accessed on phrase. They've got the accessed on phrase on each of them. And it looks like it is almost entirely alphabetical. They'd be missing just one point because this one needs to be replaced with this one because CO comes after CH. But that's the only problem that I can see. This is really an interesting one because this angel looks like he's having a really good day. But this is really interesting. So I think this person did I'm glad that this is the first one that we're looking at because I've done semesters where we just open this up and it's the first time I'm seeing them, and it's just really very confusing what the person is doing. Right now, it looks like this person is also doing something from the same kind of time period. And this is one of these essays. Not an essay. It looks like, let's see, this person is not really describing what they're doing at the beginning, so it's kind of hard to know. And this one also needs to have accessed on phrases after the citation. So I think that this needs to be, this is a really interesting looking one. And for something like this, where they talk about what they are, this person is really doing a good job talking about what rose windows are, but they're not explaining what their part of the project is, what they've done. So this person, to get full points, would need to add the accessed on phrases with the dates on these citations and add in a couple paragraphs right here where they're describing, my project is using this computer program to create a reproduction rose window following the guidelines that I can see that they did by using my own symbolism. Then something like that at the beginning would work really well. Okay, and Haley, I see you're here too. Excellent. Now it looks like this person is doing a long form essay and they're including lots of photos. So for that kind of essay, they need to have 8 photos. Let's see, there's 3, 4, 5. So we need 3 more photos. This, I would have them double check the citations, make sure they are in, they are consistent. Because what I'm seeing here is like, here's a comma, accessed on phrase, and the URL. But down here, there's the URL with a period, and then the accessed on phrase. This one, so citation number 2 is actually correctly formatted. And that's the style that they need to follow in all of them. But all the citations must be in alphabetical order, and they're not. So a lot of times people will do citations in the order that they use them. And that is only appropriate if you are having footnotes and numbers, because then the numbers go back to the direct citation. But if we're doing a works cited page or sources at the end, they need to be in alphabetical order. And that's what I'm requiring. So I think that this is really interesting. This person, I think, should just I would appreciate like an introductory paragraph that's not necessary, but they do need like 3 more photos throughout. And I'd probably put in a little bit more Because I see description and evaluation, but I think it would be really nice to for the person to talk a little bit more about perhaps their analysis in addition to doing the extra photos. So I'm trying to go back through these really quick because I want to go into the body of the class. All right, so this is a PowerPoint, and it's looking really interesting. The bibliography, they've done this in alphabetical order, and these look really good. Notice that they have accessed on phrases or dates at the end. And what is really nice is that they've kept it consistent all throughout. So this part is really good. For this kind of a thing, though, in the project description, this needs to be presented in a video format with voiceover. So that, 3 to 5 minutes where you're talking about your presentation. So I think that this is really good, but for full points, this needs to be submitted as a video presentation so we can hear their narration. And you do not have to speak with your own voice. You can write the narration down and have somebody else speak it. So you're recording another voice. I think I told you guys that last semester, somebody, when they did all these, used cartoon characters for the voices, and that was really a lot of fun.
So you could do either or. You can write like an essay with 8 photos. I'm just learning about those 8 photos now. I don't know
Okay,
why I didn't read
I
that,
don't
but
know why, because if we go into the modules and we go to,
I must have read that thing like 3 times too. I'm sorry, I was confused, I guess.
can you see my screen right now
Yes, sir.
where it says your second research or discovery project?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So I'm going to go back up here, research and discovery projects. We have research and discovery project guidelines. It says to receive credit, everything has to be done for the scope of this class. But then we talk about research projects and discovery projects. And then for research projects, I give
This is
right
called
down here.
a research and discovery project. I didn't know you either do a research or you do a discovery.
What the if you do a discovery project, it's going to require some research, but you present it differently. And if you're doing a research project, right here, I talk about the 3 different ways: as a PowerPoint, as an annotated bibliography, or as a PDF complete with 8 photos. Right there. And then for discovery projects, talk about what those are involved as well. And we're quite a bit looser for the discovery project, but you can present them either as a 5 minute or less video of what you did, either edited or time lapsed. And in that you'll talk about the research that you did. And for all of these things, you still will need, if you need to cite sources, you will need to provide the citation. And I recommend on videos, you could do that as the last page of the video, or you can just put it in a separate document. Either way, it doesn't matter. You can do a PDF report complete with the photos you took during the project, so your process photos. And the third option is a PowerPoint video, including at least 5 images of your project with your voiceover. And I have people have done a combination where they did a 5 minute video that included a short PowerPoint with a time lapse at the end that they edited together. But so this, for the discovery project, the research you do, the presentation of the research is showing off your discovery project, and your citations you can either do as a separate document or include it as a page at the end of your video. And I would recommend just doing it as a separate document, because then if it screws up, if you've forgotten access dates or anything like that, you can just edit that document really quick and then resubmit. But these are the 3 different presentations for the discovery project and the 3 different ways to present the research project. And I say as a, you can, and for your research, you can do it as a PowerPoint in video format. And you can do your research as an annotated bibliography, and I talk about what that is right here. And then, or as a PDF with 8 photos of the material that you're researching.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay. Now this looks like a movie. Um, Haley, if it's okay, I don't, can you just tell us what what your video is about?
It was on Greek mythology
Okay, and how did you tie it into the art part of the class?
because we were learning about the ancient Greeks and their beliefs and everything.
Okay, I guess what I'm asking is, did you show images of Greek art and then explain it with the mythology tie-in?
Oh, I included pictures of statues.
Okay, that's perfect. That's what I'm looking for. That's excellent. Okay. All right. And what kind of format did you do?
It was a video presentation.
Okay, like a video PowerPoint?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Great. No, that sounds exactly like the kind of thing that we're looking for. Okay, so this is a discovery project. I'm looking right here. I'm really liking this because you can see that the person has put in a short introduction, tying it directly to the class and describing what they're doing, talking about the materials and the steps. And then we can see what they're doing. And then they're writing about, what they found. And then the source is from Encyclopedia Britannica, which is excellent. And it looks to me like this is really a well done project. So this person only needed to do it in 2 pages because all their research is evidenced by what they actually did, the discovery project. And I love the fact that they've showed several, like here's the paper before they start, when they give it texture, this is the outline of the rhinoceros, and then doing this and talking about how they arrived at this right here. And down here, we can go back and look at their source right on the date that they looked at it. So this is a really good, Zach, does this help with the discovery presentation?
Yeah, I think I just did a little too much or went a little crazy with it.
Yeah, you might have. And if it was
I
more than
wrote
like,
like a whole contrasted compared like page. I learned a lot about a certain person and then I just anyway, so then see, and I watched a bunch of the videos that people made, a girl putting ruins on her face with makeup, and I was like, dang, that was 2 minute, 30-second video, and I've been learning about uh, Galileo or whoever for 4 days of my week last week. So I just need to make it more concise and doable instead of spending 6 to 8 hours on learning about a thing. I could make a 3 minute video.
well, Zach, what I would do is look at it really closely and see if you can divide it up into 2 projects. See if you can divide it up into the presentation of your research, like with a PowerPoint, and then the presentation of the discovery thing as a separate thing. And if you want to try to do that and separate it out, that gives you 2 different projects, and then resubmit one for this time and submit the other one for the next project.
Awesome. I'll just email you about it so we're not
Okay, all right.
time. Sorry about
That's that's no problem. But yeah, and I've had people on the first project spend like 12 hours and they ended up cutting it up into 3 different projects, and that took care of a big chunk of the semester. Okay, so it looks like an essay about the Venus of Willendorf. And this sounds like it could be really interesting, but what I'm seeing is for this kind of a thing, we need if you're gonna do an essay, we need 5 pages. And if they just get 7 more images and embed that throughout this, that would probably add enough space to cover the 5 pages. And, but if you do that, you can't have full page photos. You've got to have 2-inch by 2-inch photos to embed in. And that's another thing that I talk about in the description. So I think that this is really interesting, but this one needs 7 more images. And they also need to look at their citations, go back, make sure that each of them are run through one of those MLA citation machines websites, and all of them need to include the accessed on date at the end. Excuse me. But what I'm seeing is over and over is people are doing a really consistently decent job. I mean, a really nice job of what's going on. Okay, and this is a really good start. Notice that in their annotations, they have one paragraph which is a summary and one paragraph which is a reflection on what they saw, and that's perfect. That's ideal. So that's looking really good. One thing that I'm concerned about though is this whole citation should not be separated like this. It needs to be a continuous citation done in correct MLA format. And it needs to have a period at the end with the accessed on date for each citation. And then they also need to be arranged alphabetically. So T would be towards the end. H would be almost at the beginning. But other than that, this is looking really good. And then they've also put in an essay for this. If this person wanted, and with all these citations as well, if this person wanted to, what they could do very easily is, since one research thing is just the annotated bibliography, what they could do is go through, grab or edit this to right here and just refine the annotated bibliography to include those accessed on things, everything in alphabetical order, and double check that every single one of the citations is in MLA format, and that would be one project. And then the next thing is they could separate this out, Queen Nefertiti, and find 8 photos that support this, no bigger than 2 by 2 inches on a regular sized piece of paper, and embed those 8 photos into this. And, with another hours of work, she could have a second project, then just resubmit the annotated bibliography by itself, and then submit this one. And she's done with 2 projects. Do you guys see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand how you're breaking that one up.
Yeah, so this is really an excellent example of the typical Utah Tech overachieving student, which I do not have a problem with, but this person could definitely break that up, submit that like I'm saying, and then have it for 2 projects. So excellent work, Kimberly. This is great. Okay, so this is another video. Now, one thing I wanted to mention is if we go back to our modules, and if we're looking at we're looking at the project modules, research and discovery project. You see the submit thing? That's what we've been looking at right now.
Mhm.
The discussion, you also need to submit it for the discussion. And what I've noticed is most everybody has submitted their first project, but fewer than half the class has submitted their project to the discussion. You don't need to talk about anybody else's stuff. All you got to do is submit it so everybody else can see it, and that's it. So, yeah, it's only 5 points, but everybody, please remember to do that. Okay, Lindsay and Cassandra.
Yeah,
Lindsay, what's your last initial?
Peterson, it's a P.
P? Okay, and Cassandra, what's your last initial?
S.
S, okay. Is what we're gonna skip looking at all the other ones, because I think you guys are catching on very quickly. Okay, so we're gonna look at Lindsay's really quick.
I don't know if I did this right. I just did like 8 photos. I didn't realize it's supposed to be like an essay.
Yeah, it needs to be an essay, 5 pages long essay with the photos embedded, and the photos shouldn't be bigger than 2 inches.
Okay, yeah, I think I misunderstood that.
Learning
I
that
thought
now.
we were doing like a,
And then this, and you can just, what you can do is do a paragraph. If you do a paragraph for each of the photos where you have 1 or 2 sentences describing it, a sentence, and then a sentence for each of the other 3 steps of tool artistic critique, and then put it next to each of the photos, that would be beautiful. So keep this introductory paragraph, and then for each one, say a pair of horses located in the Lascaux Cave, and then you write a paragraph where you describe what you're seeing. You're talking about how they may have made it, what it could mean, and whether or not it's successful. Then go on, do the same thing to the next photo.
okay, thank you.
This would be, yeah, that would be ideal. And it'd probably take you another hour or so to do all that. Or if you're right like me, maybe 2 hours. But yeah, you picked really beautiful photos to do this with. And on this, what I'm seeing is the citations are alphabetical, which is really, really nice to see. And it looks like you've remembered the accessed on phrase for each of them, and you've kept the same format. And that's what we want. And I would just double check, make sure that these are in correct MLA format. Because usually for something like this, you're also required to have more of the editing, the editor information, plus the publishing date. So I would double check with those MLA, the citation machines that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then Cassandra, do you want to, would you mind just telling us
Yeah.
about your,
What I did is I discussed a lot of the things unearthed at the or the Royal Cemetery of I went through a
oh,
couple of
okay, cool.
different like specific collections and talked about briefly about like animals in their art that were found
Excellent.
on a lot of like the lyres.
That sounds great. Now, what did you present it as an PowerPoint?
Yeah, it is a PowerPoint.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, excellent. Very good. Yeah, that kind of stuff is very exciting to me. I when you're doing a PowerPoint that's an exploration of a dig site, that's always a lot of fun because I love going to museums and doing stuff like that. Yeah, if anybody wants to do something like that, go out to the Moapa Reservation and check out that. It's the oldest city in Nevada. Do you guys know what the site I'm talking about?
I do.
Okay, doing something like that for that, you could even walk around and take your own photos and interview the people there and come back home and talk to some of the Paiutes here, because they are related to the people that made that city. And just talk to an elder or two and see what they think. That would make an incredibly awesome project too. So yeah, I think what you guys have done is very impressive. Very cool. I love this. So great job, guys. I love what people are doing with the projects. And I hope that this is for the people here as well as everybody's listening. I really want everybody to understand that when I'm talking about presentation, getting in the right format and stuff like that, we've got to do that for the class to make these, to validate these as assessments. So we don't have to take tests. And so as you can tell, I'm pretty excited about what you guys are doing. So I don't want anybody to think that when I say, yeah, go back and put in the accessed on dates and all that kind of stuff, I'm not knocking what anybody's done, because everything that you guys have done has been really great. What I am saying is we just need to have the format be consistent. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now we are going to go back, step it back into our regularly scheduled program. We're going to talk about this. I'm going to try to spend about 15 minutes apiece on each of these three things and talk about this stuff. This is kind of exciting to me as well. But before we do that, do any of you guys have any other questions about the projects? Is what we have seen some really, really excellent examples, and we saw a couple examples that just need some tweaking. And we saw a couple examples like what Zach was doing, and then a couple other people where you're actually doing what could be 2 or 3 projects all at the same time. And I'm hoping that the reason why the due date on these first 2 projects is a lot more flexible is because I'm looking for people to get a feel of what's going on, and I want you to be comfortable asking questions. And I don't want anybody's nose getting bent out of shape when I say, well, you've got to do it this way. It's one of the things for university classes is there's a constant recurring testing of comprehension and application of theory in every class that you take. And that's one of the reasons why a big part of the point system is making sure that you follow directions. And that will, and I'm really excited because I'm seeing you guys pick up on this stuff really good, and nobody's gotten angry at me because it's their fault they didn't follow directions. And I would rather have everybody turn in things like 3 or 4 times until they get perfect scores than to just give up after the first try if it's not right. So is that okay with you guys?
I appreciate the space to let us figure it out.
Okay, good. Because I get excited about stuff and I don't always communicate as clearly as I think I am. And so and after every class, I redo the direction so it's better for the next class. So I appreciate you guys. All right, now this video, okay, what we're going to be talking about are Etruscans, Greeks, and Romans. And this is an area of the Mediterranean where, and I'll show you where this is. We'll just do a little map. We'll show just an image here of where we're talking. And if we look right here, I hope you guys can see this pretty well. But this is the area that we're talking about. Mostly right around here. Etruscans, Greeks, and Romans. The Romans were really here, Greeks really here, and the Etruscans were like into Turkey and all around here. What is interesting is, these 3 groups get lumped together quite a bit, and I think that is completely fair. And one of the reasons why they get lumped together quite a bit is each successive group borrowed heavily from the preceding ones. And to the point where their architectural structures, the way that they dealt with the human form, kind of morphed and blended over time. Now, this video right here is really important. I think last time we tried watching a video, it did not work. So when you get to this, watch this very much, it's very important that you watch this video. It talks about representation of the human body in Western sculpture. The Etruscans, Greeks, and Romans, because Italy was so wealthy as agglomeration of port cities, particularly for trade to North Africa, the Middle East, and the Crusades. This, because they had so much political influence, they had an awful lot of cultural influence as well, because everybody wanted to be like them. Everybody kind of wanted to suck up to them a little bit, and that's fine. But because of that, as we look at the Etruscans, Greeks, and Romans, we recognize a lot of what we see as high culture art for our European history, for essentially the European history, because it is so heavily um, weighted on the side of what the Italians like to do, because they were the guys that were the gatekeepers for culture for a long time. And for a long time, I'm talking about between about 300 BC to about 1600 AD. So, we're talking 2000 years. But we just came off of looking at Egyptian and Mesopotamian and sculpture. What do you notice? This is from the Mediterranean. So we're going east, or we're going west and north of where we just were. What do you notice about these faces? And I'm thinking right here. Remember the Etruscans, their civilization was into Turkey, which is right next door to where Mesopotamia was. And they traded a lot with Africa. They were in North Africa. These eyes, they remind me so much of Mesopotamian eyes and the Egyptian eyes that we saw in the tomb paintings. Do you guys see that as well?
Yeah, it does. It does look like it matches a couple of the things, like especially I looked up with my research.
All right. Yeah, excellent. It's now we know that these bodies, thank you, Cassandra. We know that these bodies are kind of stiff. This is a portrait presentation. This is not a naturalistic depiction. And this is one of the questions I'm going to keep harping on, just because when I was in your shoes, it irritated me so much to hear stuff about it. Do you think this is what they really look like? Do you think that they did this because they didn't know what human beings were actually shaped like?
No, it's intentional and stylistic.
Yes, Lindsay, gold star stapled right to the middle of your forehead. Excellent. Yeah, it's stylistic. It's intentional. These guys knew what they were doing. This survived 3,000 years. There's no way they did not know what they're doing. Okay? They know exactly what they're doing. So this is a very stylistic presentation of a husband and a wife who are equals. It looks like to me that they have a touching love language. It seems like to me they both have this kind of mysterious Egyptian type smile, and they have those Mesopotamian / Egyptian eyes. And you'll notice that the hair is a lot more like Mesopotamian as well, which I think is really fascinating. So these guys, this is kind of the nursery culture for the Mediterraneans that fed so much into European culture. Now this, I did want to talk a little bit about this video. This talks about a brief history of representing the body in Western sculpture. What I love about this video is that it's pretty obvious that the art historians talking about it, that are narrating this, are very aware of exactly what Lindsay just said. It's stylistic. It's meant to represent the cultural mores and ideals. And they talk about how the human form has changed. The representation of the human form has changed. It is very naturalistic. It's idealized in some parts of history, and it's more stylized in other parts of history. It doesn't have anything to do with whether or not people were dumb and couldn't see it. It has everything to do with exactly what Lindsay said, the style, what's important to the culture. And this is important because we are going to see, the human form is one of the most ancient subjects of art, and we are going to see representations of the human body without drapery or clothing. When you're an artsy fartsy type person, the language you need to use is draped figure for somebody who has clothes and undraped for somebody who does not. All right? So everybody practice that on your own time. Draped for clothing, undraped for no clothing. So these two figures are partially draped. She has a sweater top. They both have skirts or lavas, and he has an undraped torso. So we're looking right here. She's partially draped, but this is a really beautiful sculpture that is done by Polyclitus. And Polyclitus is one of my very, very favorite sculptures. Praxiteles and Polyclitus are two of my favorites because they did these beautiful human forms that are reclining, their states at rest. They seem a little bit off balance, but they seem like they're caught in a moment right before, right after activity. And she is partially draped because she has a skirt and then just a fragment of cloth on her torso. Some of the things you'll notice with Greek sculpture is there's not a lot of muscle tone around the neck area. Everything else looks pretty much naturalistic for the most part, except the hands are usually in very stylized presentations. And older sculptures, the eyes are more seem to be informed by that Etruscan, Egyptian, or Mesopotamian kind of outlook. And the rest of the face seems to be a little bit too idealized to be real. And there is a specific reason for that, that subsequent, like the Romans copied without having as close of an idea as to why as to the Greeks did. And it has an awful lot to do with religion. And we'll get to it in just a second. And then we get to the Roman. Notice that this is a draped male figure. So another way of saying that is a dude in armor. And notice that he's wearing very typical Roman armor with the skirt and the leather. These are loin girders or loin protectors. They're armored leather straps so that your butt and your front don't get damaged in battle. He has the torso plates that are also on the back, and he has this very stylized hairdo. Now you see a big difference between Etruscans, very, very stylized. It seems almost like the stylization that's with funerary art with the Egyptians. You get this stylization that seems just ethereal with the Greek, and with the Roman, yes, you still get that very over the top stylization, but here we're doing a lot of detail everywhere, just a whole bunch of detail, to the point where if you saw this in real life when it was done, it would be fully painted and it would look like the person just frozen in time. Very cool stuff. Now I'll tell you the reason why Praxiteles and Polyclitus did this is that they were heavily informed by the Pythagorean school. Have you guys heard of Pythagoras?
No, I have not.
Have you heard of the Pythagorean theorem?
That I have.
Okay. Pythagoras was the one who is attributed with annotating the Pythagorean theorem. He's not the first one or last one to use it, but he's the guy that did the most publication on it. And the Pythagoreans, they were a religious order in ancient Greece. So we're talking about 5th, 6th century maybe, where they believed that everything could be measured with proportion. And I know you've heard of the golden rectangle, the golden section, golden proportions, those kinds of things. And if you guys are interested, we can talk about that a bit more next week. But the Pythagoreans are the ones that used proportion to define musical scales so that people could write down the proportions and then somebody else 1,000 years later could play the same tune and it would sound identical. They're the ones that give us the measures, the chording, and everything like that we still use today. So that chording system is the chording system that we use today on your guitar, on your flute, on your glockenspiel, on the piano. It's all based on what the Pythagoreans wrote because that was part of their religion. Another big part of their religion is that they felt that the divine could be represented with a human form. So godliness could be represented with a human form if the human form was distorted using the golden section. And what's fascinating about this is that we all are based on the golden section anyway. The golden section is a ratio 1 to 1.618. And if you hold up your hand, I don't know if you can see in my camera, my finger. Okay. Can you guys see my finger on the camera? Actually,
Yes.
let's not do that. Okay,
Oh.
you could see it?
Yeah.
Okay. If you go that first from your knuckle to the or from your the knuckle on your hand to the first and the first section of your finger, if you measure that, the proportion of that to the next section of your finger, that's going to be a golden section ratio. This will be 1.618. This will be 1. And you can measure that to the next knuckle too. But your hand is based like that. The shape of your hand is based like that. If you hold up a piece of paper, that's based on the golden section ratio. The Pew Charitable Trusts did a series of studies during the 90s into the early 2000s, where they found that most people unconsciously gravitate towards reflections of that golden ratio. And a baby will smile more readily for a woman holding the baby when her smile is in the golden ratio proportions. And what Praxiteles and Polyclitus did then is that they would start with the regular human model. So this is, a beautiful woman who would stand pose for them. And then as they were modeling her, they would change her face and her nose and her mouth and different portions so that each element of her body fit more closely the perfect golden ratio. And why is that important? Well, even though we kind of fit in with that, everything around us kind of does. No person is a perfect golden rate. Well, very few people are perfect golden ratio perceptions. In the 90s, when the federal government was paying several universities to do digitization of faces to create what we now have as facial recognition software. This all started in the 90s. What they did is after they got a sample of 10,000 men and 10,000 women, they lined those faces up so that the pupils, the center of the eyes was lined up and had the computers aggregate and then average them. And what they found is that the perfect average of 10,000 human beings creates a face that is that perfect expression of the golden ratio. So the face would almost look like this. And like I said, there are very few people that actually look like that. All of us have one eye just, slightly bigger than the other, or slightly lower, slightly higher, whatever. All of us are just slightly off, except there are two living actors right now, two living performers that are really, really, really close to that perfect golden ratio in their facial proportions. Anybody want to guess who those two people are? One man and one woman? The man is Denzel Washington, and the woman is Vanessa Williams.
I
The
don't think I would
singer.
have guessed them.
What's that?
I said I don't think those were the people I would have guessed.
Well, and it just when my mom found out, she was single at the time. She was just swooning for Denzel Washington. So, but you can, and I think you can see the Romans were using a lot of that idealized proportion without, I think, having the same level of understanding that Polyclitus did. So, but you can see that it's very heavily informed by what the Greeks were doing.
Can I
And then these,
comment on the Roman statue?
yeah,
I learned, and maybe you might have more clarity on this, but I learned that the reason why a lot of the noses were damaged in these ancient sculptures was because when the Catholics came around, they believed that the souls lived within these statues and that they were demons watching them. So they would scratch out the eyes and destroy the noses so like they couldn't tell that they were there.
well, that is really funny because there were a lot of Catholic emperors who had their portraits done in the same style. And what is really funny is the thing that I heard was that people would knock off the noses and scratch out the eyes when they would conquer an area to make fun of the people that they had defeated. So that sounds like a very similar thing to what you came across. That is so funny. Yeah, so the noses they didn't just fall off over time. They were purposely knocked off.
Mm-hmm.
That's hilarious. Well, I want to, one of the things that the Renaissance made very popular was the idea that this is what pure sculpture is supposed to look like, white marble. And that's why I wanted to share this with you guys. Hopefully you can see this. It says chroma, ancient sculpture and color. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay. This is what those sculptures look like. They were heavily painted and they were beautifully painted. So, this is Cycladic idols. This is what one of the Cycladic idols may have looked like. And I think this is so funny because I think this validates the idea that they were probably Barbie dolls. Because it looks like a face to me, like something that a kid would play with. But I want you to go to this. That there's also a video about this too. Um, in the 1980s, into the 1990s, all around London, there are statues of Emperor Severus Septimus, who was the founder of London. So this guy, he was alive and kicking like 1900 years ago, almost 2000 years ago. And all of his busts are roughly the same kind of person, white marble. Not, everybody just assuming that he's Caucasian, like everybody thinks all Roman emperors are, because that's what people think. People started noticing as they were cleaning these that there were little flakes in the pores of the stone. And when they got in, they realized that those flakes were actually pigment flakes. And those busts were actually painted when they were first done, just like reconstruction of the marble funerary stela of Frasticlea. This kind of a thing. They were painted. And when they analyzed the chroma of that pigment, they discovered that it was for not a Caucasian skin, but for a Libyan or Syrian North African black person skin. It's not a Caucasian. It was an African black man who was the Severus Septimus, the Emperor of Rome. And a lot of people were shocked. Then when they started going through history and finding other portraits of him, that's when they realized that the artists weren't just taking liberties and making him look like them. Severus Septimus was born in Libya, and his wife was born in Syria. Severus, his parents, they had been, and his family had been members of the Roman Empire for generations, and his father had become a senator. So he was in a position where when the chips fell the right way, he became emperor and he was the founder of London. And I think stuff like that is just absolutely fascinating to me. History is never tied up neatly into concrete spaces. History always changes as we learn and find out new things. So the chroma of these sculptures, this would probably had blue, red, and purple on this. It probably was very metallic with white faces with hair color here. And he probably had the skin tone of Central or Southern Italian with, big brown eyes. and dark hair. I mean, can you imagine how different that is? What is so frustrating is that during the Enlightenment era, there were a couple art historians that started telling people that the only pure sculpture was white marble, and white was the purest of colors. And so all beauty must revolve around whiteness. And it just, the reason why those sculptures are white is that as the Italians during the Crusades and after were getting more and more money, different families wanted their workers to find these buried Greek and Roman sculptures. When they did, all the paint looked gross and corroded on it because it'd been in mud for 1,000 years. So all the workers cleaned off the paint. And that's the only reason we think Greek and Roman sculptures were stayed white, because the workers who found them cleaned them up. And that's it. Doesn't have anything to do with purity, big fat foam finger air quotes. But these are, I want you to go through the Etruscans. We're just going to spend like 10 or 15 minutes at the most on this, probably less than 10 minutes. And I want you to look at all these types of things. I'm going to click on the Met thing so we can look at the Etruscan art, but I want you to spend a little bit of time with the videos. Some of the things that we see with the Etruscan work is there isn't a lot of color. Well, why isn't there a lot of color? Because this stuff is 2,500 years old. A lot of pigments fade. Do you have a poster that's your favorite poster when you were a kid, that when it hung up in the sunlight, all the red bleeds out and it gets really faded? Have you guys had that?
I've had similarly with like jewelry, if I leave it in my car, like everything hanging from my rear view mirror is now sun bleached.
Yeah. And that's a perfect example. So a lot of the times when we look at this stuff, we got to remember this is not what it looked like when it was made. And there's a really good chance that this is pretty close. Ceramics, that's pretty permanent, but still, when it was first made, a lot of this was shiny and bright looking. There's going to even the bronze statues were painted, so there was a lot of color on them. And so imagine this. This was probably painted brown to mimic wood. And this right here, all the detail was probably picked out in red, blue, white, and brown. You can imagine that it was really vibrant. And a lot of the times we think, as Etruscan stuff, everything was this color, but they used a lot of red, white, and blue and brown in their decoration. Just like Lindsay said, a lot of the color is bleached off or been worn away. If you can imagine, if somebody like this keeps an ossuary box or an urn in their home, just over the generations, paint and stuff are going to come off just because people are touching it. But some of the things I want you to look at is the level of detail, the level of thought. Doing a sculpture like this. So this is terracotta. Terracotta means clay of the earth. That's it. But because as artists, we've got to validate our education, we say terracotta instead of clay. Does everybody understand that?
Yes.
Okay, if it's more than 20 years old, it's terracotta. And we say that because we're artists, and that's pretty much it. I hope that didn't hurt anybody's feelings. But looking at this, what this person did is this is either going to be a multiple firing or a single firing. If it's a single firing, they would have had to paint this background with wax. They would have, or what they would have done probably is first paint this figure with red, let that dry completely, paint the area around the figures, the red figure and all this other stuff with wax, and then go over the whole thing with the black. And then when it fires, The wax protected the black from attaching anywhere that they didn't want it, so that you would see the red figure and then the plain clay background. So there's a lot of thought that goes into this stuff. Something like this is the person would have had to create this, coat it with something that was black, and then scribe the stuff into it and then fire it. And this kind of a thing, it was probably clay with a red slip that they painted on and then fired it. And a couple of things that we know from this culture is making forms like this is not a simple and easy process. Making a form like this takes a long time. Do you guys remember what we talked about? If you have a culture that produces bronze or significant clay work like this, where it took like all day to make, what does that tell you about the society as a whole?
They valued artistry and could afford to have people whose whole lives were dedicated to it and they could support themselves off of it.
Yes, excellent. Very good. Yeah. It tells us a lot about what the society valued and exactly like what Lindsay said. That's excellent. Very good. Now, the Etruscans, they did not like, there's not a lot of friction between them and the Greeks so much, but they did not like the Romans. They ruled over the Romans for a couple centuries. And when the Romans finally got into power, they erased and buried a lot of the Etruscan stuff because the Etruscans were not very kind to them. But there's a couple things that I want to show you. So, look at all those videos and stuff like that. This is ancient Greece art, but before we get to that, I want to look at the architecture for just a second. Okay, this is not what I was thinking, but this is the kinds of stuff the Greeks came up with. The more solid columns, that harkens back, I mean, the Mesopotamian columns were almost solid. The Egyptian columns were relatively solid with decorations on them. And by the time we get to the Etruscans are putting a little bit more painting and decoration on them. By the time we get to the Greeks, they're doing this vertical fluting. They're doing all this kind of stuff. It would take a team of 3 craftspeople maybe a week to make one section of the column, which again ties right into what Lindsay was saying. People valued this, and their culture was consistently self-sufficient that they could afford to pay people to not work in fields, not farm, not make stuff other than art. And really very interesting stuff. And we can see now what is fascinating about this when we look at this kind of vase and this earlier Etruscan stuff, even though there's a lot of detail on this, you look at this, there is, so this is mermaids and just, some fantastical kind of fun stuff going on. What is interesting when we start looking at what the Greeks were doing, what do you see as a difference between this and what we just saw with the Etruscans? And I want whoever answers, talk about what the figure is doing and the detail.
Is she loom making?
This is a lyre. So very,
So
very,
music.
yeah. So it's music. Yeah. Some of the things that I'm seeing is I love this line right here because that shows me that the wind is kind of pushing her skirt against her legs. Can you see that little detail?
Yes. So it could be like she's traveling in the market or like with a band.
Yeah, yeah, she's walking, or maybe it's worship. Maybe she's playing a hymn to Dionysus or something, and she's dancing while she's playing. But yeah, it's active. She's doing something, and the level of detail is astonishing. The figure work, I can see, it looks to me like this person valued those kinds of proportions that we talked about. They valued the idealized human figure. The Etruscans valued beauty, but they weren't as sold on the idea of this idealized human figure. You know, what looks good in their society, yes, but you know, look at the proportions of the feet and the hands and the legs and how this particular face is shaped. It's very interesting to me. And getting these tiny, tiny, tiny lines, you have to really know what you're doing, because do you know how they got these lines? They did not paint them on. What they
Did they
did
carve
was
them?
they painted wax on and then carved through the wax. Yeah. Really fascinating stuff. Yeah, so it's interesting to me. So you can kind of see a little bit of the change between the Etruscan and the Greeks that came a little bit later. And I'm trying to, there we go. You see the hairstyles, it seems to me that they're still kind of influenced by the people that they trade with, which were, you know, they're still Egyptians are still wearing their wigs. And some of the hair kind of reminds me a little bit of that. And I wonder if that's part of it. And we have these stylized cloth robes. And then this kind of thing reminds me of a feathered skirt, like what we saw in the Standard of Ur. I don't know if that's what it is, but that's what it makes me think of. These people were not unaware of each other. They knew, because the Greeks uncovered ruins just like anybody else did. So really, really interesting stuff. And this is where we start getting into actual structures that we recognize as very much Roman. And the there's a lot of videos. I want you to just, you know, can watch the videos at double speed. That's totally fine. But I do want you to look at them and see images of some of this architecture and stuff that we see. Okay, can you guys see my Khan Academy page now?
Yeah.
Okay. Now you look at this. This is a Roman style. It's a basically, well, it's a pilgrimage temple. It's a temple that people go to so that you can say you went to it. And there'd be things like, there was one of my favorite Roman inventors was a guy named Hero or Heron, who he invented a steam engine. He invented all sorts of clockwork mechanics that were later used for transmissions for water wheel mills. Super genius at this time, but he invented devices that were all over Rome and the Roman cities, where you could take a coin, throw it into a fountain, and if it would hit a plate, it would be just enough weight to drop the plate and then trigger something that would pour out a measure of the holy water or holy oil, so you could take that with you. And you know, so people would go so they could tell people, yeah, I went to this temple or that temple. And sometimes these temples were, these kinds of buildings were also centers for people to meet, like senators would meet, or really important community leaders would meet to hash stuff out. But there's something that there's a couple things that I want you to pay attention to this. We still have those fluted columns like we talked about that are very much indicative of Greek influence. But notice this right here. Do you recognize this roof line, that angle from other Roman stuff? You know, from stereotypical stuff you see in movies. Does everybody see that?
Yes. I
This,
feel like in movies that's like the very traditional style used so you know as like context clues that that's the
right.
era it's from.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what people use during the Romanesque era. This is what people still use today when they're building like government buildings and they want people to be impressed. They still have that kind of roof line. This is 22.5 degrees is the slope that this is at. That is actually a roof line that was heavily used by the Etruscans. Then the Greeks used it, and then the Romans used it. And now, you know, any government building today that has this kind of Romanesque style architecture has the same kind of roof line. But remember that 22.5 degrees is the slope. And that's really important. Then we're also looking at the Romans made a lot of arches, And these arches are based on the circle, the perfect circle. This is called the Pantheon. It is a famous Roman building. One of the reasons why it's famous is that it uses the circle in all its arches. But in order to, you see these are coin notches. But these notches were cut out by the architect to lessen the weight of the stone in the ceiling so it could be bigger. So they're starting to think, they think about height and size. The Romans are the ones that built the Colosseum. Here's another. What's the angle of this roof?
22.5 degrees.
Excellent. And just for your edification, so I look really smart. When you see a column like this, the fluting tells you it's from which society?
Romans.
It has its base in the Greeks. With the Greeks, the fluting, the Greeks are the one that invented this. And then these little curlicues at the top, these are called ionic column heads. So the term for these curls are ionic. And yes, you're right. This is what the Romans used. They used a lot, but it's based on the Greek column. A lot of the times the Etruscans were smooth. The Greeks are the one that did the vertical flutes like this. And then the Romans, like Zach said, lapped it up. They use that quite a bit. Now, this shows a difference. This is a Roman style arch, and this is a corbelled arch. This was invented, the first time we see this is actually in Celtic ruins that predate the Stonehenge. But the difference is the corbelling, you have stones that come horizontal, and they might be faced on the inside to get that roundness of the arch, but all the weight is pushing down like this, and you've got to have some bigger stones across the top to kind of bridge the gap, because the stones are based on horizontal layering, just like a brick wall. The difference is with the Roman arch, notice that the stones, instead of horizontal, the stones point in towards an imaginary center of this missing circle. And that's what the difference is. That's what the Romans did. The reason why this is important is if the stones are horizontal, even though it looks like an arch, the weight is very difficult to distribute because all these stones, they want to fold down and fall into the archway. But with the Romans, the more weight you put on this, the harder this stone will push against its neighbors, and the more thoroughly that weight will go down to the outside. Do you guys see the difference here?
Yeah.
You see a lot of this kind of stuff work in ancient Japanese and Chinese burials, a lot of ancient African burials. You see stuff like this in Zimbabwe, Egypt, in Egyptian temples. It's very rare to see arches, but if you do see an arch, it's going to be based like this. And Central and South American architecture has a lot of this. Ancient Chinese buildings, same kind of thing. This is really interesting because it's an evidence of the Romans having a culture that could support not just artists, but also people that were mathematicians and engineers. So with Roman architecture, like Zach said, we got these fluted columns. We have these, notice that the arch is very much based on the half circle. And you can see in this photo, you see those right here, there's a course of stones that change their angle so that the stones are pointed towards the center of the circle. Do you guys all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. Lindsay, I don't know if you are seeing it or not, but I appreciate the fact that you're answering like that because it makes me feel like I'm being heard. So thank
No,
you.
I am seeing it. I just don't have a lot of input on the fact that I'm seeing it.
Now, this is kind of an interesting thing because we have that round Roman style arch with the stones pointing in towards the center of an imaginary circle, but we have this rectangular opening underneath it, but you can still see the circular opening. And that is demonstrates that very strong influence of the Roman style arch. So it doesn't always have to be a perfect circle, but you can see on this one, it is based on a circle. You know, this one, the circle is quite a bit bigger than the width of the opening. Here, the circle is based on the width of the opening, but you can see that the big thing that you can see here is that these stones are all pointing towards the center of the circle. And what's really fascinating to me is that this was such a powerful tool for the construction of different things that it was used everywhere the Romans touched. It was used for generations and sometimes thousands of years because it really helps to build stronger buildings. It allows you to build walls that go up a lot higher and allows you to distribute weight more effectively. If you guys look up Roman aqueducts, they've lasted for so long because of architecture implementing things like this. When we look at some of the most beautiful, huge scale buildings in the world, like the ones that Mimar Sinan made in the 15th century. So we're talking 2,000 years later. He is still using Roman style arches because they're that good. And
It kind of
here's,
shows you the power of good craftsmanship.
yeah, and good design, excellent design. Now this one, this looks like it's computer simulation because if it was actual, then we'd have the bricks pointing in towards the center of the circle. So I'm thinking this is a computer simulation, but it's demonstrating, yeah, it says reconstruction, but it's demonstrating what the aqueducts were doing. Oh, and this, the Colosseum. The Colosseum was so big, you could fit between 35 and 50,000 people in there. Can you believe that?
It's like
That
a
is just
modern day
astonishing.
football stadium.
Yeah, yeah. And what is so fascinating is without getting into a panic, you can clear everybody out in less than half an hour because they put the stairs in the right places and they did a lot of really good things. You can also see graffiti that little kids scratched into the walls down here where they were talking about the stats of their favorite gladiators,
Mm.
which I think is hilarious because, kids followed gladiators just like kids today follow basketball and football stars. And
Yeah, I
there
was
were
just about
many,
to say that.
what's that?
I said I was about to say that. That's funny.
Yeah, and it's what is great too is just like NBA and WNBA, there were women gladiators too, and they had their own circuit to go on, and there's graffiti of them too and their stats and stuff. People enjoyed this kind of thing, and gladiators didn't always fight to the death. Gladiators fought to the entertainment, and then a lot of the times, even if a person was defeated, the audience could still cheer for them, would still cheer for them because they had put up on a good show. And it had a lot less to do with let's go out and kill each other. It had a lot more to do with entertainment. And I think it was Hercules was the one of the primary benefactors for male gladiators, and Isis was actually one of the principal benefactors for female gladiators, which is interesting because Isis, of course, is not a Roman god. She's from Egypt. But here we're seeing a complex of several Roman style buildings, like those columns that Zach is talking about, fluted columns. And then we've got what is the angle of this roof line and this roof line and this roof line? Anybody remember?
22 and a half.
Excellent. Now, if we go in here, you'll see reproductions of this too. These are called friezes. They are panels reminding everybody in the city how awesome the guy is who built this building. Buildings were not funded generally by the government. They were funded by private citizens wanting to impress everybody. So they were funded by senators' families who wanted to get more power in the Senate. They were funded by merchants. They're the ones that paid for these buildings. And these panels right here, they're sculptures that are set up against or sometimes carved from the stones of this area. This what's it called? Pendentive. And I think that's the word for it. But they're sculptures where arms and legs and stuff like that would come out, but they were brightly painted and they would sometimes show stories from scripture and myth, and they would have the benefactor, the guy and his family who paid for this, they would have their faces on the different mythological heroes and stuff. I just think that that's awesome.
So it was like a billboard.
Yeah, it was a billboard that was kind of saying, look how awesome I am, but it's not really me. It's just my position of authority allows me to do kind things for everybody else. So, you know, what can I say? I'm a humble person, and I'll tell everybody how humble I am every chance I get. That kind of advertising. Yeah.
Mm.
And I just so and right here you can tell what are the hallmarks that we see that define this as Roman architecture. We see those Ionic columns that are borrowed from the Greeks. We see arches that are based on the half circle, and we see sloped roofs that are based on 22.5 degrees over and over again. We see layering where the lower layers sometimes will have either wider arches or taller arches, and then as you go up, the arches get smaller and smaller. In this case, shorter and shorter. Lots and lots and lots of columns. Now, these columns would have anywhere from 6 to 8 sections, and each section would take a team of 3 to 5 people a week to carve. Somebody's doing something like this, it's a crap ton of money. So a lot of circle, a lot of geometry, a lot of use of rectangles, a lot of golden section geometry, lots of beautiful stuff. And then this is getting closer to the modern age. And this is where we start seeing a lot of use of cement in the architecture itself too, instead of just brickwork and stonework. And these vaults where they're based on the circles, but they're kind of intersecting circles. Like this is a circle going this way, a circle going this way. This reminds me, if you look forward to Gothic architecture, 1,000 years later on, they're doing the same kind of things in some of those churches in Europe. Very nice stuff. Oh, this is a video. We're not going to be able to watch that. Sorry about that. It seems like the videos just do not translate well. Septimus Severus is the guy that I was talking about. This is another video. I want you definitely to watch this. Remember who Septimius Severus was, or Septimus Severus? What city did he found? Do you guys remember?
No.
London. He's the guy that when people found out he was actually from Africa.
Oh, the statue guy.
Right. So we have here, this is an article that I thought you guys would really enjoy. It is of graffiti from Pompeii.
Mm.
Just some really cool, some of the oldest graffiti, actually the oldest graffiti that anybody's found in Europe is from a Roman villa, and it's two girlfriends holding hands with their names saying friends forever. Isn't that cute?
That is cute.
It's
We've
basically
always
the
wanted to
Latin,
make ourselves known.
yeah, it's like the Latin equivalent of BFFs scribed on Grandpa's house. I think that's hilarious. All right, well that is all that I have for today for you guys. Do you guys have any last questions or anything like that?
Um,
Thank you for all your help today. I appreciate it.
Oh, sure, no problem. I'm glad I was able to clarify. And you guys, I'm so happy with what I'm seeing with the projects. It is just amazing stuff you guys are doing. Very cool stuff. So thank you. And Zach, yeah, email me and we'll talk through what you need to do so you can split your large project up into smaller chunks.
And it might not even be that large when I look at how many pages and how big the picture. So I have more clarity now. Thank you.
Okay, all right, good. All right, well, thank you, Zach, Lindsay, Cassandra, for coming today. And I will look forward to talking to you all next week. All righty?
Okay.
We'll see
Have
you
a good
guys.
night.
Yeah, thank you. Take
Night.
care.
You too.